As if 2020 didn't bring enough angst with climate change in our faces and a pandemic keeping our faces covered, hopefully, with masks, we also had an incredibly contentious election. All right, the big news, Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump, whether the president admits it or not. Locally, Republicans put the 2nd Congressional District back in their column. Ben Ray Lujan held off a better-than-expected run by TV weatherman Mark Ronchetti. Democrats solidified their hold on the state legislature. In Julianne, we saw huge interest in voting this time around. What grabbed you most when all the ballots were tallied?
Well, there's a couple of things that are interesting. I mean, we only saw about 15% of voters cast a ballot in New Mexico on election day, which is a huge difference from years before. But I'd like to note that turnout was in the high 60s, and in most classrooms, a test grade in the high 60s is still a D. So we're not, we should be proud of ourselves for having good turnout and for people caring about this election, but I don't think a D is a great grade for a democracy. I think it's the other thing that's interesting is that we had the Supreme Court weigh in. The county clerks wanted to send all of the ballots, send every registered voter a ballot automatically by mail. And of course, the state Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to do that. And I think that the next wave we're going to see on election law is, should the state of New Mexico pass some laws to have that happen rather than trying to pressure the courts into changing the rules at the last minute.
Andy, women, huge this cycle, part of the election narrative, certainly. New Mexico congressional delegation, as you know, is entirely female and entirely either Hispanic or Native female. This is news, but it also starting to normalize. Am I off here, or the fact that so many women are winning offices now feels like it's not just a thing, it's not a blip, this is reality, this is what's going to happen from this point forward?
Yeah, it seems that way to me as well. I think, especially when you consider that it goes across party lines, right? That
good point.
You mentioned New Mexico, it's all female delegation, but one of them is a Republican. So I think that there is some normalization going there, and I think maybe both parties, especially Republicans now, are saying let's and look at the legislature, right? Crystal Diamond took over for John Arthur Smith. It's a pretty key spot there, and I think we're starting to see women from both parties sort of get their chance now.
Dan, interestingly, power positions at the state legislature. Touch on that, if you would, now being in female hands.
Yeah, I think that'll be Senator Mimi Stewart has been nominated to be this new Senate President Pro Tem. She still has to win the full Senate vote, so we'll see about that. I think one striking thing to me is just kind of this deepening of the urban versus rural divide in New Mexico. Albuquerque is increasingly becoming more of a Democratic stronghold, as is Las Cruces and Santa Fe. There's currently, as of this year, only going to be 2 Republican legislators in all of Albuquerque out of about 30 seats, which is a big change from even 4 or 6 years ago.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, the rest of the state is getting more conservative. The only House Democrat who lost was down in the Silver City area, and I think some of those rural Democrats have been defeated. So I think we've also seen that nationally, but I think that's a trend where, getting more polarized between the cities and the rural areas. And certainly, I think that shows up at the legislature in debates over gun issues, cannabis, things like that. And I think that's something to watch going forward.
Jessica, pick up on that natural jumping off point for you there. What's the sense of in the rural parts of our state when it comes to female positions of power and just frankly representation?
A lot of our local tickets this year were GOP oriented, and a lot of them were women. And I think that is just a natural reflection of some of the shifts in our local level here at the county as well. We had the really big one, the 2nd Congressional District. It was already held by a woman, Democrat, and the GOP, I think it's fair to say that they're extremely happy they managed to flip that back over to Yvette Harrell. Tongue-tied, sorry.
That's right.
The polarization that Dan was talking about between our rural communities and how they react off of what's happening in our urban areas, I think is going to continue to happen. But maybe the expectation is, and I know the conversations that I've had recently are about bringing some moderate conversations to the state legislature to achieve some of the that are for the benefit of the state, whether you're in a rural county or you're in one of our larger metro counties.
Yeah. Julianne, do you think, can Republicans win in bigger cities here, and can Democrats win in smaller areas here? Or is it just, this is just it right now? That's the divide, as Dan Boyd was mentioning.
I mean, it seems, pretty defined at this moment, in the way the voter participation flows, in the way that the major parties have control and the types of candidates that they put up. It's discouraging in northern New Mexico. Even if you want to have conversation about the big issues between a Democrat and a Republican candidate for a local office, it just becomes very difficult. The Reporter, I think, has a reputation for being rather left-leaning and being not really too sympathetic to the conservative causes, which means that in this day and age, the Republicans don't even want to talk. And that doesn't really, I don't think, further anyone's understanding of each other's perspectives. And I think that for a lot of voters in Santa Fe who would be willing to kind of consider the other side and just sort of get written off like, oh, you're a progressive, you live in the blue dot, yep. We're not even going to try to talk to you. I think that attitude is pervasive. I mean, Mark Ronchetti would not give an endorsement interview to the Santa Fe Reporter. So it's not a surprise to me at all that he lost that race, because I think that indicates an unwillingness, whatever your campaign, platform is, if when it comes down to it, you're unwilling to talk to people that you perceive as your enemy, then you're not going to get very far.
You got to have some folks from outside your party come in if you're going to win any election. That's a good point there. All right, now the second biggest story of the year, news that dominated the summer. The killing of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police and Breonna Taylor's killing in Louisville, Kentucky, gave rise yet again to America's race problem. Other police killings led to both violent and nonviolent responses. The Black Lives Matter movement found firm footing, and here in New Mexico, Native Americans raised their voices against statues, monuments, and buildings that honor controversial conquistadors like Juan de Oñate and Diego de Vargas. Andy, in Albuquerque, an Oñate statue protest turned violent. Looking back on it, what seems most important about the unrest we saw this year?
I think a lot of it points to it shows how tricky this kind of stuff is and how infuriating it can be to some people, given the leader's response to these things, right? In that Oñate protest, there's probably more questions than answers about what the plan was.
Right. So
a little quick background was that I think a week before, there was sort of an overreaction by police. There was a lot of rubber bullets and SWAT gear. And then the week later, it was like they pared it back, but then there was no one on site. And that's the question of where were they? When did they plan to step in? There was clearly a lot of shoving and pushing and yelling amongst those groups, but not a uniformed officer in sight. And then we also found out later that there was an undercover officer there. So again, more questions of what was the plan there? What were you going to do before somebody got shot?
Right. And it might be reasonably argued that situation in part cost the chief of police his job, as a matter of fact, in Albuquerque. Julianne, a conversation is exactly what Santa Fe Mayor Alan Weber promised, but it never happened. Then on Indigenous Peoples Day, as we all recall, activists pulled down the Civil War era soldiers monument in the plaza. A huge difference in the way it was handled versus the reworked entrada during the fiestas. That conversation, what needs to happen to get that going now?
I think there's a lot of sentiment in Santa Fe that like the time for talking came and went. That this idea that we're now going to have this Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which still has not been approved by the governing body, and the members still haven't been appointed. The idea that they're somehow going to really heal this great division that has taken place in our community, I think it's just a fairly far-fetched. As you pointed out, that immediately upon the heels of that shooting happening in Albuquerque at the Oñate statue, there were protests planned in northern New Mexico. There was one planned in Alcalde, and the officials there in Rio Arriba County decided to pull down the statue of Oñate in advance of that protest happening, and so that didn't happen. Just a day or two later, it was Juneteenth. and there was a protest planned in Santa Fe. And so instead of letting that action happen, the city decided to, really, it seems clear now, attempt to remove the obelisk in the middle of the night.
Right.
There's debate, there's people saying that's not really what was happening, but there was a work crew with equipment on the plaza. They did not remove the obelisk. They did remove another statue in front of the cathedral in Santa Fe. That happened in June, and then I think people were, the mayor said, we're going to take down these controversial things. We're going to have a conversation about the language and the continued hurt that's being perpetrated on Indigenous people in our community. And when that didn't happen, I think, people got frustrated, and you can just Google Plaza Obelisk to see the rest.
There you go. Hey, Dan Boyd, out of this whole thing came the phrase defund the police. Everyone's heard it. No one's not heard it. And while the idea of what that means or should look like varied, certainly, it really became a rallying cry for both sides of the aisle here. And who thought 3 words would be dangerous territory? How come this became so controversial?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of these catchphrases catch hold in the popular opinion. I think this one, at least for most people, weren't exactly calling for police departments to be totally defunded or disbanded, but for kind of reshaping and for a better relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve, especially communities of color. I think both Andy and Julianne have kind of mentioned that public officials haven't really been leading the charge on this. They've been kind of trying to respond to these public movements. And I think, at the state level, Governor Lujan Grisham created a racial justice council. There was a civil rights commission that met. So there's been some movement, but, as of this date, still no real changes in state level policy. So I think these conversations still need to be had, but I think they do need to be held quickly. And as we found out last year, if that doesn't happen, then people will take matters into their own hands. And I think the elected officials maybe need to be a little more agile on these issues.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, how did this all play out in the southeast part of your state, in the southern parts of New Mexico? What happened there during all these protests?
The issue was at a boil in some communities, but I think down here it was more of a simmer. Mm-hmm. For us, it was an opportunity to watch and see what the debate was happening in Santa Fe, Albuquerque. But it was also an opportunity to see some of our really underserved communities, our communities of color, minorities, have an opportunity to speak up. So we were blessed to be able to help cover some of these local panels addressing these issues between inequality and disparity. And also, one of the things that I saw that was probably the most interesting come out of all of this in southern New Mexico was the rise of the younger voices in these communities, right? We saw some really young leaders step forward and say, okay, here's where we stand on this. We commit to being leaders on this issue for our communities. So that was really inspiring.
Busy summer, no doubt. We only have one issue left, folks. We'll be back in a few minutes.